Alright guys, welcome to another Charbie Talks. Today we're going to be talking about the Final Fantasy XII HD Remaster. There's not a whole lot to talk about here for two reasons. The first is it is a remaster, so I won't get into anything that we've already seen in the previous game. And the second is Square Enix has kind of been hit or miss with information. They'll tell you something, but they won't tell you enough to actually know what it means. For example, they've said the game will be easier. And they also said that they've balanced the game. What those two things mean, nobody really knows. Mostly it has to do with license boarding, I suspect. But again, and I haven't played the international version before, so I don't know if that's also just genuinely easier than the original. You guys can let me know if you know. But my understanding is, actually, you know what, I'll get to that in a second. So the first thing, obviously the international content, as I said, we have a different set of license boards now. We have 12 different classes as opposed to the one giant board that everybody shares. And new for the PS4 version, which I believe they're calling the Zodiac Age, is instead of picking one class per character and having 6 classes, you can actually pick a combination of 2. Now, my understanding is you can also pick the same combinations. So, and they changed a few names. Red Battle Mage, I'm actually blanking on some of the other ones. Archer, pretty archetypal classes, so to speak. I probably should have pulled that up and so I could read off all the classes, but it doesn't matter anyways. So you can actually combine two, or you can have all the characters running the same set, is my understanding. I could be wrong, but from what I've heard on message boards, that was the thing. Because people were trying to figure out what would be like the most godly of combinations for their 6 characters. I'm assuming that's for like a huge post-game push. I'm pretty sure you can beat the game. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple really bad combos, but I'm sure you can beat the game for the most part with any kind of combo, but it would just be harder for the post-game content and maybe some of the more elite hunts. So I'm excited about that. Again, and I will be uploading this game as a series on my channel for anybody who is interested in watching. Again, the international stuff will be new to me. I'm super pumped to be going back and playing, and I'm super pumped that they've changed it enough that it won't just be another basic run of you're getting spears, you're getting bows, you're getting the guns, go nuts, right? You're actually going to have to be strategic with your characters. It's actually going to, at least for me, I think it's going to encourage use of all 6 characters. I pretty much every game took Ash, Bosch, and Balthier and just rolled with it. So the other 3 I almost never used. So getting them involved and having certain people assigned to certain things is going to make it more interesting as well. So again, I mentioned that in the original Japanese one there was one class per character, so you only got 6 total. This one you get 2. I think that's what they mean by it's going to be easier. Again, it could also just genuinely have been easier before, and they've also said they're rebalancing it. So why they're rebalancing it to, and I'm using air quotes here, easy, I'm not so sure, but nonetheless, I suspect that because you do get all the power-ups and all the extra skills from a second set of classes, that is what's going to be kind of the difference in terms of difficulty. So that's exciting. They're also including, you can now control your guest characters. I believe they also level up with you as well. So that, positives and negatives. With Larsa, especially early on in the game, he won't be using infinite high potions because they'll be coming from your inventory now. But later on in the game, guys like Redis, who really didn't have a whole lot going on for them, can be made a little bit better because you can also mix around with their gambits a little bit. I don't know how many gambits they have available to them, if they only have 2 and you got to work with that, or what the deal is, but I also don't know what kind of skills they're going to be getting outside of like attack and high potion. So that'll be interesting to see. You can also control espers now. That will be a little bit better. I still, unless they change the strength values of espers, there weren't many times in the game, especially from the mid-half on, where espers were a better choice than your 3-man party. Outside of trying to actually get them to use their final technique which you can now select whenever you want. If you just summon him and just go boom, you know, a Hellfire or whatever Rebellious is. I'm actually not even sure. I haven't played in a couple years, so. But if that's gonna, I guess that could make them a lot useful as well, because you can get that initial attack in, and it's an all attack, so when you're fighting a boss with maybe a couple supporting guys, that might make it a bit better as well. But again, there were very few situations, and unfortunately the Aeons in 10 suffered from the same thing, where there weren't too many situations that your main party was actually, or wasn't as good as the Aeon, outside of doing an overdrive, or in this case the final technique. So we'll see if that really changes the gameplay or not. It is nice to have that option either way. There are actually some Espers, and I've been playing this game off and on for a long time. There are some Espers whose final techniques I've never seen. So being able to actually use them all will be kind of nice. So in addition to that, we've also got Trial Mode, which looks super fun. It looks like it's just basically a gauntlet of fighting enemies and making your way through floors. I don't know if you actually like physically move floors, or if it just kind of tells you you're now on floor 66, these are your enemies. And I know floor one, or I shouldn't say floor 100, because I'm not 100% sure if it is 100 or not, but the very top floor, either way, you fight the 5 Judge Magisters, and they're not pushovers like they are in the main game. Like, they're a very formidable set of enemies, if, again, my sources online are to be believed, and they're online, so you probably shouldn't believe anything you see online. But I'm still pretty pumped to be playing that. It sounds like a pretty awesome mode. The thing about these international versions is it's actually nice to see that they're adding content. I realize that this was done in the international version in Japan, but still, the fact that they're adding extra modes and stuff like that is... And again, I never understood why they don't just do that all in one go. They wait for the international version. You had the Dark Aeons, you had the ability to control monsters in 10 and 10.2. Now you're getting trial mode and all this other stuff. Like, I'm not... Again... I know it's a thing over there. They do a lot of international, I'm using air quotes there, versions after the North American release, but I still never understood why they couldn't just kind of put it all together, because they don't even do that now, right? I mean, now it's considered DLC, not international, but the fact that you can get it easily now, if it were released in Japan, you could just, you know, download it here. They don't seem to do that anymore, so... I never really understood the reasoning behind that, but I also don't live in Japan, so maybe that's a thing. They have New Game Plus as well. My understanding is there's 2 versions. There's a level 99, where you start at level 99, and part of me assumes that that's either for one of 2 reasons. If you just want to kind of replay through the game and just kind of go through the story, so to speak. The other reason I can think of would be if you wanted to try different sets of classes, but didn't want to have the inconvenience, I'm using air quotes here, of picking a wrong class and finding out it's not very good, because, oh, excuse me again, you kind of need to actually be somewhat successful with your classes to be able to level up your characters to get more points to increase the classes. So, and the other New Game Plus, or I guess in this case would be New Game Minus, is after you beat trial mode, you get to play at level 1 and never level up. So that one will be a lot more fun. I'd be interested to see if they have a trophy for that. We'll get to trophies in a second, but the purpose behind that, and again, this is all speculation on my part, but I am kind of going under the assumption that being at level 1 is A, going to be rough, and B, you're really going to have to strategize, not only in terms of what classes you have, but how you approach certain battles. Espers may all of a sudden be more useful, though to be fair, my understanding is they level up with your levels, so they'd all be at level 1 as well. But even just having them to potentially tank a strong attack for your parties, you know, stuff like that. So there would be a lot more strategy involved. And at first I was thinking you wouldn't really play through the side stuff, like all the hunts and that, but then I got to thinking you would probably need to go through those hunts to be able to acquire some of that equipment earlier on, so you actually have a fighting chance. Because in the normal game, acquiring stuff early was like overpowering, but if you're only at level 1, it's kind of almost evening the playing field if you're lucky enough to even get that far. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I'll be the recording that I'm going to do is going to be like a full playthrough from beginning. I don't know if I'm going to do a separate one of just level 1. I've never actually successfully completed the no sphere grid in Final Fantasy X, so I suspect I will not be that great at being at level 1 here as well. So I made it to like Xanarkand, but there are just too many powerful foes for me to get by. And I'm pretty sure Sin would have just completely wiped me out, so yeah. So I'm just looking at my little jot notes here. A few other things. Obviously, they're going to have some new sounds, voiceovers, and graphics. And by that I mean the graphics will be updated mostly for characters and major characters, I assume. The other kind of awesome thing was that the voiceovers are going to be redone. And by redone, I don't mean they're going to re-record them, but they won't be compressed anymore. It was a combination between hollow and robotic-y that I always found the voices in 12, and from such a high production game, from such a major franchise like Final Fantasy, it really, it just kind of rubbed everyone the wrong way, I think, in terms of, the ultimate legacy of the game is, there wasn't a whole lot of cutscenes to begin with, but it was still rough listening to all the mumbled and the robotic-y and hollow, and so fixing that will be very good. That was probably one of my few critiques about the original game, so going in and fixing that naturally is going to make things better. So my understanding is there's also going to be new music. I'm hoping, and this is only because I'm kind of a music guy, but I'm hoping that they do the same thing they did with the PlayStation 4 10 release of allowing you to flip between the original and the remastered. Because obviously the first time through I'm going to play through the remastered soundtrack because I don't know any better, but if they start screwing up things like the Esper battles, if they start screwing up Battle on the Big Bridge, things like some of the more iconic, because like the background music, I enjoyed it quite a bit, don't get me wrong. But if they redo it and keep it similar, I won't be terribly upset about it. But there's a few key tracks that I'm kind of thinking about, even just right now, that if they're really bad, it's going to ruin it for me. Because with 10, enemy attack, like the standard boss battle theme, it took a couple tries, but you know what? I actually enjoy it now. I actually enjoy it more than the original, I think. Or at least very close to. Other tracks, for example, Challenge, which is what plays when you're fighting Unalesca, completely lost anything it had going for it in the remastered version. So sometimes, and we've been fortunate enough to see, again, I've referenced 10 a couple times, 10-2 as well. They didn't have the remastered soundtrack, but we've seen how they handled the remasters. We've seen how they handle the international content. We've seen how they deal with their improvements to the graphics, to the sound, all that kind of stuff, while still maintaining the original games. So I think this will be a good remaster. I'm looking forward to the trophies, which was the last thing I wanted to point out. I'm sure there will be one for collecting all the Espers. I'm pretty sure there was one for beating the trial bosses. I don't know if I heard somebody say that there was, or if they were thinking there was. I'm thinking there will be as well. Like the 5 judges I mentioned earlier. Probably one for beating Yzmat, maybe even one for beating Hellworm. Probably one for beating Omega Mark 12, because they're kind of the bigger bosses in the game. One for beating the game, defeating Vayne. There might be ones regarding your hunter rank level, like when you get to a certain level, you may unlock a rank. I'm hoping that they don't have like the 1, 4, 7, 13 Espers or whatever the numbers were again. Because when you used to go to Mont Blanc and get a special set of prizes, oh, you collected 4 Espers, here's this special set of stuff. I hope they don't add trophies for all of those. But other than that, I'm kind of curious what some of the other trophies will be, because a lot of times, especially with the Final Fantasies, like there are some key bosses. Like I can see them when you defeat Belius, whether that counts as collecting an Esper or just defeating him, because the Tomb of Wraithwall, I always broke the game up into like 5 parts, and the Tomb of Wraithwall was always the end of the first part. You had Judge Bergen, I believe his name was kind of the end of the second. You had Sid was the end of the third. I guess it would be Shemhazi would be the end of the fourth, basically the bottom of the Great Crystal. Not entirely sure how that would work out, but and then I've always kind of seen the fifth as the Pharaoh's Lighthouse to the end of the game. Although one could point out, or one could make the argument that the end of the fourth was actually the Pharaoh's Lighthouse in the second battle with Sid and Famfrit. So, you know, there could be 4 trophies there. As far as anything else, potentially maxing out a license board with a character, maybe maxing out all license boards with all characters. I'm just thinking back to how Final Fantasy X did it, but other than that, I'm kind of drawing a blank on what trophies could be, so I'm actually pretty excited to see what they are. I am hoping that they do a full set of 50 plus the platinum, obviously, and not, I think they did like 34, 36 or something like that with the remasters, the prior two. So I'm hoping they do add some more, but also, given the fact that I can't even think of any more, maybe 35 wouldn't be much of a stretch in terms of, you know, a high number or a good number. You never know, so I didn't want this to run out nearly as long as my Crash Charbie talks did, because we had a lot to talk about there. I had a lot to kind of compare and contrast. So that is that. Like I said, I am excited for the game. I'm hoping it turns out very well. I'm hoping the soundtrack goes very well. I'm hoping that it isn't too easy. That was my only other... I should have mentioned this way earlier in the video, and I apologize for that, but when they mentioned that they're balancing it and it will be easy, that scares me a little bit. Obviously, they do have these extra challenging modes, but part of me, and again, maybe it's because I've played this many times, maybe it's because I'm a bit of a classical gamer in the sense of I'm not a huge fan of all the hand-holding that's going on in today's games, where 90% of the game is basically a tutorial that they're walking you through until you get to like the final boss. But I'm a little worried that it will be too easy, and I realize that compared to the international Japanese version, it will be, because you're going to get that extra class with all their power-ups, all their extra skills. You know, you're basically doubling your power in every sense of the word. So I'm hoping that they looked at that and seen that they need to rebalance the rest of the game, and that they kind of make it more to an even medium as opposed to a super easy. So that is my only kind of concern going in, outside of my personal problems with soundtrack changes that sometimes happen. And the other thing too is, if they're going to rebalance it, I hope they rebalance the entire game and don't just like cherry pick bosses. So you're rolling through, you know, the Hene Mines, for example, and then you get to, I think his name is Tiamat at the end of it, and he just whoops your ass because you've been doing very well against all these little guys, and there's been like no challenge whatsoever. And then all of a sudden it's like fighting a super boss the next time you turn around, because that's the guy that they chose to kind of tweak, if I can use air quotes as well. And they kind of left everything else. So I hope that the rebalance is a full across the board, and I hope it brings it up to a bit more of a normal range. But as far as things to look out for, that's pretty much it. We know the game, we know Square Enix. Whether or not you liked what they did with the PS3 and PS4 games, they did very well on the PS2. The games themselves were amazing. Same with PS1, but since we're talking about the remasters, you've also seen them do remasters. 2 of them. And they turned out extremely well. I think actually, and this is a bold statement on my behalf, but nonetheless, I enjoyed Final Fantasy X on the PS2. I think a lot more people enjoy it now that they can also do the monster catching, leveling them up, getting the stories of that stuff. Like that one, and again, it's a big feature, but that one feature I think really helped a lot of people get over some of the few problems that they had with the game. So, and that's always exciting to see, is more people getting interested, right? More people enjoying it. That's always what you want when you make a game. So I think they turned out well. I think this is going to turn out well. I thank you for listening to this video. I won't commit to a set schedule, but my next Charbie Talks will be talking about the Resident Evil series. It is kind of if I had to pick kind of the 3 staple series on my channel, it would be Crash Bandicoot, Final Fantasy, and Resident Evil. So naturally, I've now done 2 of the 3. I'm going to tackle the other one. We're going to talk about my thoughts on 7, because I actually did like a complete 180 mid-game on how I felt about the game. And then we're going to talk about my thoughts of the series going forward. We haven't really heard anything from them since 7. Technically, they haven't actually released their 3rd set of DLC, so we'll see what happens there. We do know that there should be, at some point, a Resident Evil 2 remake coming out, so we'll kind of get into that. And then, again, for things like a Resident Evil 8 or Revelations 3, I'll kind of throw out my thoughts on where I think the series should go in terms of direction creatively and from a production standpoint. So I hope you guys will join me for that. Again, this game comes out in 2 days, and I will be recording it in its entirety. I will be doing all the hunts. I will be doing, hopefully, all the side quests, including the optional bosses. I know I kind of said that last time and I left the Yzmat fight out, but there's probably going to be a trophy for it, and I would like to add this to my list of platinums. So with that, I will bid you adieu. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for listening, and I will see you guys in one of either the series recording for this game or hopefully the next Charbie Talks. I'll see you guys then.